Underneath Egyptian religion, you again have the key terms. Now, I'm getting a little sleepy, so just listen carefully. I kind of do my thing. I'm going to talk. You won't see me. You'll see my kitchen. I'm going to fire up my coffee, and then I'll be right back. Take a tiny little break here, and then hit Egyptian religion, and then the last part, which is kind of like Egyptian life, and then we should be pretty much ready to go, and you should be in good shape, okay? So, Egyptian religion, hopefully you guys can hear me. The Egyptian religion, remember the Egyptians were polytheistic. Now, polytheism means that they believed in more than one god. So if the Pharaoh was considered a god on earth, then there had to be obviously more than just the Pharaoh existing somewhere around the universe or around the world. And the Egyptians believed that the Pharaoh was one of many gods. Of course, he wasn't the chief god, but nonetheless, he was very, very important for them because of the fact that he was a representation of the gods here on earth, just in human form. So we have the Egyptian Pharaoh, who is serving a purpose as a god here on earth, but he is not the chief god. The chief god, of course, as I get my little, see that? Tigger. When I was little, I used to love Winnie the Pooh. It's actually Josh's mug from when he was little. Where's my hat? So the chief god of ancient Egypt on page 80 and 81 is Amun-Re, or Amun-Ra. And we talked about the fact that you can spell his name a bunch of different ways, and you should just basically know who he was. He was the chief god. He was the sun god, okay? And if you remember correctly, it was believed that he came up in the east, okay? And then he'd live, and then he would set in the west, later on in the evening. They believed that he was born each day, lived a full day, died each day, which is why, you will remember correctly, hopefully you remember, that's why they would bury their dead on the western bank of ancient Egypt, or the western bank of the Nile River, because they figured if it was good enough for Amun-Ra to die, a god, the god, chief god, sun god, to die on the western bank, obviously it must be good enough for everybody to be buried there. So that's what they did. Okay? The Egyptians, much like a lot of religions today, they believed in the afterlife, or life after death, which brings us to the mummification process, which we'll get to in about 30 seconds, because on page 81 there you will see that there's a chief god, Amun-Ra, and then they also believed that there were other gods, Osiris, which was the god of the living and the dead, Isis was his wife, and there were also, of course, regional differences, as your book talks about on page 81. The guy with the cool hat on page 81 is Amun-Ra, and Osiris, Isis, and there were a few other gods. The sky god Horus was their son. Okay? Page 82. Now, here on page 82, I need to just cover a couple things. First of all, you all did you guys did this online thing and this project, and you wouldn't want to be an Egyptian mummy. And you know, one of the reasons why I had you guys do that is just so that you understood how involved the process was, because of the fact that the Egyptians believed that life and life after death was so sacred that the pharaohs had to be taken care of. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details because it's gory and it's not necessary. I just wanted you to understand that different cultures and different civilizations believe different things about the afterlife, and they all treat it differently. And that was one way they honored their god or their goddess Even though it's a little strange to us, and a little gross at times, which I agree, but it is one of the ways that they honored their god or goddesses at the time. So in order to journey to the afterlife, the ancient Egyptians had to actually preserve the body, which they did through mummification. You learned how they did that. Put the body in salt, wrap them, put perfume on them, put some incense on them, some spices on them, and then they put the body into the tomb, or in the Old Kingdom, the tomb was the pyramid. Okay? So, they believed at the time, and you can find this on page 82, alright? They believed that the souls of the dead could not survive without food, so the next common thing that they would do is they would literally just bury the mummy, or the pharaoh, with all of their stuff. Furniture, pets, clothes, rugs, food, whatever they thought that they might need to travel through the afterlife. If you look on page 82, it talks a little bit about the process of mummification. It was expensive. It took a little while, 2 to 3 months. It talks about the, I'm not going to try and get too gross here, but you do have to understand that the important parts of the body, remember they didn't know much about the brain and brain activity. They believed that everything existed through and because of the heart. So the heart was the most treasured organ at the time, and they would put some of those organs, they would preserve them, kind of like we have, you know, organ donors. If somebody passes away, then you have the opportunity to donate some of your organs to someone who might save a life, whether it's a heart or kidney or some type of transplant. And what they would do is they would put these in these, the heart and all these different organs in these jars. And these jars were called canopic jars. Now, I'm going to spell that for you because I know that it was in your website. Alright, and you had to actually, everybody see that? Canopic. Alright, and you had to actually draw something, talk about a couple of the different organs that were involved in that kind of thing. Alright, there were people preparing the coffin, people preparing the body, people preparing the tomb, people preparing all the items that would go in the tomb. People would prepare the, believe it or not, people prepared the family members for the process of the burial, kind of explaining to them what was going on, so that the pharaoh received his or her proper, respectful, godly, godlike burial. All right. Okay. Let's see. Page 84, the pharaoh's tombs. You also had an online, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, I know you did. You had an online activity that you were investigating some pyramids through PBS workshop. It can be found on page 84 in your book. And it talks a little bit about the pyramids. It gives the key terms. It talks about the Great Pyramid built by Khufu, for Khufu. Remember, the ancient pharaohs of the Old Kingdom would often build these pyramids for their own death. So it'd be kind of like me saying, you know what, I'm going to build me a pretty sweet mansion that when I die, you all can bury me in the pretty sweet mansion with all my stuff. Because that way everybody will go, whoa, that must be the sweet mansion that Mr. Ling's buried in. As you can tell, my sweet mansion here. I probably wouldn't want to be buried here. So, the pyramids were tombs, and the pharaohs themselves were would hire people, slaves, workers, to build these pyramids in the Old Kingdom. That changed over time. King Tut was not buried in a pyramid. He was buried in a tomb in a place called the Valley of the Kings. But Khufu, the Great Pyramid at Giza, which is the largest, was built by Khufu, but for Khufu, in other words, by his workers for him. Each stone was about 5,000 pounds, so basically your relatively small car weight that we drive. Approximately 2 million stones, if you look in your book, I think 2 million, yeah, about 2 million stones, and it could take anywhere between 15 and 20 years to build. And if you looked on the website, you probably saw that they talked about the different ramps that went up. There's, of course, the idea that aliens made the pyramids, and maybe they did. Maybe the aliens used the ramps. I don't know. But they would carve out the stone by hand, put some of them on barges, sail them down or float them down the Nile River, take them off the barges, and through massive manpower, on page 85, it talks about the sleds, the wooden rollers, levers, all these different ways of actually moving the stones into position. Okay? And you can read through that, and I would reread that to help you out for the test on Wednesday. On page 85, I would also take a look at the Section 3 assessment. Everybody see it there? Section 3 assessment. Because, let's see, there it talks about some critical thinking and comprehension questions. Here, let me do this. Whoa, that's as far as I can go. Okay. The critical thinking and comprehension questions. What were the ancient religious beliefs? The afterlife. It talks a little bit about why the pharaohs were concerned about the condition of their tombs and how some of those were probably built. Now, some of that information, the basics, and I do mean the basics, might come from some of your online reading and the activity that we did or have been doing and how we've been talking about it in class. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm not looking to try to get you to get something wrong on purpose, but I want to make sure that you guys read. As I said before, a lot of you are very good at professional skimming, and that's not good. Okay? Professional skimming, you miss tiny things, and when you miss the tiny things, the tiny little pieces all add up to one big piece. And that's what I mean when it comes to grades. So the tiny pieces, if I take off 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, 2 points, 1 point, all of a sudden you got a lot of points off. So that's why I want you to make sure that you read carefully whenever there's some outlining due or whenever there is some type of online project or extra reading in class or even listening so that you can actually hear what's... Oh my goodness. Whoops, it's my phone. Sorry. Alright, so last section, okay?